Hello friends, neighbors, and fellow VEDSies. No need to adjust your computer monitor. Today's video comes to you as just a voice. The voice may be familiar enough to you that you can imagine who is speaking, but you can't see the speaker. You can't see what outfit I might be wearing to distinguish me from the other personas. I am, for all intents and purposes, a new persona. One you cannot see, one that exists only as a voice. So I guess it's a little strange to call this a video. Is it still a video without visuals? Does this qualify as a video blog? Maybe I should throw some video in just to be safe. Here's some footage of an adorable puppy. Now it's a video. But this video is in fact going to be mostly audio. There won't be anything to watch. All you have to do is sit back and listen. Hope that's not too disappointing to you, but the fact is that audio storytelling is everywhere, and has been since storytelling first got its start. Think about it. How many children have fallen asleep listening to bedtime stories? Arguably the oldest form of storytelling is auditory. Before there were movies, the written word, and possibly even the idea of acting things out on a stage, people spread stories by just telling them. And you might think that perhaps this style of storytelling is antiquated. But although it has ancient roots, and although storytelling technology has advanced considerably, auditory storytelling has never lost its place. And indeed, in recent years, it's even been enjoying a resurgence. So perhaps it's time for this channel to look at this form of storytelling more closely. Auditory storytelling was obviously a necessity in the days before the written word, but what is it about this form of storytelling that maintains its staying power today? Well, like any other medium of storytelling, it has unique, inherent advantages. Text allows for the entire story to exist within one's imagination. Visuals can allow one to see a story come to life. Auditory storytelling exists somewhere in between these two. You have to visualize much of the story in your imagination still, but depending on how the story is being told, the story can also feel like an experience that you are a part of. A person telling a story can put emotion into the words, provide voices for the characters, and even, should they desire to, provide sound effects. And increased technology has made this even easier. Let us take as an example the Orson Welles radio drama War of the Worlds, which is presented as a series of news bulletins documenting an alien invasion of Earth, as based on the H.G. Wells novel of the same name.
It's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth is kind of V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate, and the monster or whatever it is can hardly move.
The drama presented the story as though it were actually happening in real time, something that allegedly caused mass panic as people mistook it for a real news story, though more recent research has found that these claims were likely exaggerated. Even Orson Welles himself claimed that he didn't come up with this style of storytelling, and by the time War of the Worlds was presented, it was common enough to have radio dramas presented as real-time stories. Radio was the medium for electronic communication and entertainment for a long time, and indeed it had something of an immersive quality. Imagine being able to simply sit back, close your eyes, and listen as someone on the radio presented a story and allowed you to experience it in your own imagination. Even as television became more common, radio programming continued to provide news and entertainment. The radio comedian Stan Freberg, in fact, once did a routine illustrating the staying power of radio, demonstrating that radio could use the imagination in a way that television couldn't.
Okay, people, and now when I give you the cue, I want the 700-foot mountain of whipped cream to roll into Lake Michigan, which has been drained and filled with hot chocolate. Then the Royal Canadian Air Force will fly overhead towing a 10-ton maraschino cherry, which will be dropped into the whipped cream to the cheering of 25,000 extras. All right, cue the mountain. Air Force. Cue the maraschino cherry. Okay, 25,000 cheering extras. Now, you want to try that on television?
And when the Doctor Who television show was cancelled, radio dramas were one of the ways writers kept the story going. Though the Buggles song "Video Killed the Radio Star" gave the impression that radio was becoming obsolete, radio continued to be a strong storytelling medium, though perhaps not as popular as it had been before. Radio, as it once was, is still very much alive, though much of the programming has changed. Radios are almost exclusively for news and music now, and not so much for storytelling. So where has that auditory storytelling gone? Podcasts. Podcasts have become a fascinating medium for auditory storytelling, allowing it to make something of a comeback. Many of these stories are extensions of news stories, with podcasts like Serial and Embedded taking a deeper look at some of these stories. Podcasts have also allowed for a return of audio dramas, like Welcome to Night Vale. Much like War of the Worlds, many of these dramas tell stories as they are actually happening, creating worlds and stories that we only see through the voices of the performers. As such, they return listeners to an experience of actually living a story rather than just observing it. Welcome to Night Vale, for example, treats listeners as actual citizens of Night Vale, part of all the strange happenings that occur in the town.
One death has already been attributed to the glow cloud. But listen, it's probably nothing. If we had to shut down the town for every mysterious event that at least one death could be attributed to, we'd never have time to do anything, right? That's what the sheriff's secret police are saying, and I agree. Although, I would not go so far as to endorse their suggestion to run directly at the cloud, shrieking and waving your arms, just to see what it does.
Alice Isn't Dead and Within the Wires, stories from the same creators as Welcome to Night Vale, are structured as recordings intended for participants in the story they're telling. And because these stories come in something of an indirect second-hand form, that is, stories told through other mediums like letters, or, in this case, recordings and radio broadcasts, we often don't get the stories in a linear fashion, but in little bits and pieces that slowly start to come together, like we're all exploring the world and discovering the story together. Serial, a podcast which tells a true story week by week, became very popular through this very style of storytelling. In this podcast, we're looking at stories that have, by and large, already happened, and so instead of progressing the story week by week, the show digs deeper, with each episode examining a different aspect of the story, or looking at it from a different point of view, ultimately giving us a very complex and deep experience of the story. But there is another layer of storytelling in this podcast as well. In addition to Serial being a story that has already happened, it's also a story about the host and various producers learning more about that story. It is, in essence, a story about finding a story.
This search sometimes feels undignified on my part. I've had to ask about teenagers' sex lives, where, how often, with whom, about notes they passed in class, about their drug habits, their relationships with their parents. And I am not a detective or a private investigator. I'm not even a crime reporter. But yes, every day this year, I've tried to figure out the alibi of a 17-year-old boy.
Embedded does something similar, though in a much more condensed fashion. And podcasts like Invisibilia and the TED Radio Hour find many stories and build them around a theme, looking at a particular subject from several different directions, and providing a much richer storytelling experience than perhaps just one story with that message would have. Podcasting has also opened the door for amateur content creators to make their voices heard by a wider audience, much in the same way video blogging has. This means that with the right equipment and platform, two guys of extremely minor internet quasi-relevance can discuss whatever strikes their and your fancy. Audiobooks provide another medium for auditory storytelling. They're nothing new, of course, dating back to the days when they were still books on tape, and perhaps their original intent was simply to allow avid readers to free up their hands and eyes while a book is read to them, so that they can drive or do chores or whatever they might be doing. But audiobooks can very often become performances. The audiobook of World War Z, a book which presents an oral history of a fictional zombie war, with the author interviewing many participants of the war, has an all-star cast of actors, like Alan Alda, Nathan Fillion, and Carl Reiner, performing the different characters rather than just straight-up reading the text of the book. The audiobook of Dolores Claiborne, a book structured as a first-person stream-of-consciousness court testimony, also feels more like a performance than a reading. In this way, audiobooks can blur the line between book and staged performance. And audiobooks bring us right back to the original purpose of storytelling: There's just something about having a story read to you. It allows you to be as imaginative as you would be reading the book yourself, but also to experience the story in the same somewhat passive way you might watch a movie or a play. And auditory storytelling allows for something else on top of that. That truly unique ability to completely immerse yourself in a story, in the words and emotion of the reader or performer. It requires nothing but listening, one of our most fundamental senses. And in this way, not only is it one of the most ancient forms of storytelling, but it is truly one that will surely last for centuries to come. So until next time, friends and fellow VEDSies, keep listening.